You're listening to the History Things Podcast, a conversational approach to discussing social, industrial, maritime, music, and military history. Join us and our special guests as we dive down the rabbit hole of your favorite stories from the past. Follow the guys on social media by searching at the History Things Podcast. Be sure to leave a review and a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app. Matt and Pat are coming right up. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoy the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the History Things Podcast. We are rolling along here. Summer Blitz. Hopefully taking it right to you. Hopefully your gas smacked against the wall. Can't handle it. Too bad. We got more coming at you today. And I am broadcasting from the War Department. As always, very excited to be here. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, guys, gals, ghouls, goblins, aliens, anybody listening. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Borders, Matty B, author, ranger, historian. How are you, legendary friend of mine?
Legendary. You hit quite the pitch on that introduction, too, sir.
I think this season it's all about how do I make it more ridiculous, but also accurate somehow.
There you go.
It is accurate.
As long as it's accurate.
I haven't said anything off the chain that wasn't accurate yet.
That's true. That is very true. No, but we're doing good. We're very pleased to be back recording again. And, of course, pleased to have our guest with us in the studio today.
That's right. Before we get into that, just a quick note. This is the Summer Blitz, so you are hearing from us a lot right now. So hopefully you're enjoying all the various episodes that are dropping. And if you have made it out to our sites this summer, we thank you for it. By the time you're hearing this episode, a certain top secret site will have had its battle anniversary. And Matt very, very much appreciated you unofficially coming to say hi to him. So obviously go do that. How did that go for you, by the way? Did it go great?
Busy. Very busy.
You know you love my post-production question where I ask you when it really hasn't happened yet, but we got to do that. It's
Well, trust me, with the amount of stuff we're planning, it's going to be busy.
It's going to be very busy. So, well, let's get into it today. We're going to cover a bit of local history. We're very excited for this. Normally, Matt and I are looking way out into the world to cover stories that, we want to get to ourselves and not necessarily able to do so. So what we're excited about today is we're covering one that is quite literally in my backyard.
Right.
Right here, we're probably talking about a subject that's 30 minutes tops from where the studio broadcasts from right now. But before we get into today's subject, we are going to get into today's legendary guest. You have heard these golden pipes before on the History Things podcast. We did a really unique episode 2 seasons ago about sailors that accompanied General Braddock on his doomed expedition in 1755. And once again, joining us is the man himself, the executive director. Is that your fancy?
Right,
Dude,
yeah.
you're the
That
man.
is awesome.
The executive director of the Union Mills Homestead. Ladies and gentlemen, Kyle Dalton. Welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, and hello to all the cats and kittens out there in Radio Land.
Yes, dude. Yes, sell it. When we last spoke to you, you were working over at the Civil War Museum of Medicine, and by the time your episode actually came out, you had taken this new gig.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny that we recorded the 18th century episode while I was at a Civil War museum, and now I'm at a different site, and we're talking about the Civil War.
You're just time traveling. Oh, my goodness. But so we did, that was a great episode because I learned a lot about a subject that is directly related to the era where I work in, but I don't get to focus on that story so in depth day to day because what we do at my job is focused right on the place itself. So it was neat to dive into that era, something that I know a lot about, but that was so new to me. And we've gotten great feedback from that episode. So thank you very much. Our listeners were super into that episode. I didn't realize.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, Pat, because for especially our local listeners, Kyle, we've had a lot of comments about how unique that was.
Oh, good.
And how much they didn't. I mean, we obviously weren't aware of it, but it seems like a lot of folks were really blown away by that story. So
I got a
we
lot
really do
of
appreciate it.
feedback, too, on my social media because, I mentioned at the very end of that, the website that I run, I put run in quotes because I haven't updated it.
Right. That's what you said. You're
and
like,
I got like 24 people following it from the podcast
Nice.
episode.
Good.
And we just mentioned it at the very end. Like, I don't know about all you listeners out there, but I often just skip the promos at the end where it's like, yeah, I know you guys said what podcast you're pushing.
We're very engaging. People listen and take every word we say very seriously. Very seriously.
We hope.
Well, they take me too seriously sometimes. If you
That's
read the
true.
hate mail we get, it's like, did you not get the joke there? Looking at you, one guy. Anyway, so today we're here to actually talk about where you're working. You know, last time we got you in the studio. First of all, it was a different studio. Do you like the new place?
I do. This
you
is
like
pretty
the
sweet.
old place?
Yeah. No, it was nice, but this is both more open and more cozy somehow. It's sort of an MC Escher studio.
I am excited at that description because that's what I said to Matt. I was like, why does this feel bigger and yet somehow more intimate? And
Right.
That's
that was
awesome.
Exactly Pat's description.
Mission
actually.
accomplished. But when we had you in here last time, we were getting you outside of the box, right? You know, you were working at an area focused on the American Civil War, focused on a specific subject of the American Civil War.
Right.
And we talked about a different century, different military, different country, different branch of the armed service. It was great, but it was outside the box. Here we're in the box professionally. We're here to talk about what you do day to day, 9 to 5.
Pretty much,
8
yeah.
to 3,
I mean, well,
noon to 8.
See, here's the thing with being an executive director. The hours don't really stop.
No, that's right. Anybody that was expecting a joke about not working, you have no clue what upper management is really like. You always work.
I mean, it's different for different museums, but this is a small museum. I am the first full-time employee in the Foundation's history.
Wow.
Foundation was created in the 1960s. So that gives you an idea of the breadth of work that needs to be done.
Definitely.
And I don't want to underplay what the people do there. In fact, last time, one of the things that was great about the talk about Braddock's TARS was that was all research that I did.
Right.
If there was something that I needed retrieved from, say, the UK National Archives, I'd reach out to a friend and be like, hey, could you go grab this for me? But I knew what it was, and I just needed to get the document itself to do whatever. This is pretty different because there's only a little bit of research in this that I've done. Almost all the stuff we're going to be talking about today was gathered by the volunteers and the board of the Union Mills Homestead Foundation. They've been hyper involved in this site. The reason it survives and thrives is because of the board members, because of the volunteers, and because of the support that members have provided. I have here as one of the main sources this book called Pastime, Life and Love on the Home Front During the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. And I know this is an audio medium, but I'm going to show you guys. This is a Bible-sized book. This is a thick book.
That's a good book.
And it's almost entirely letters, journals, and diaries. There's pretty much no opinions in here.
Ooh.
This is just primary sources. And this is just for 4 years of the Homestead's history. We're going to get into like how long that history is and what we got.
Right.
But this was done entirely by the board, the volunteers, and especially led by Helen Drury McSherry. She was the editor of this. She's the one who really made it happen. Okay. But there's multiple diaries, lots of correspondence, draft notice, all kinds of stuff that's been transcribed in here.
And just from the Homestead or the whole county?
Just from the Homestead.
Really? Wow.
This is a incredible amount of information. We're not going to get to it all today.
Matt, have you been to Union Mills?
I haven't actually.
It's awesome. I went and saw Kyle, got a behind-the-scenes tour, got to see some really cool stuff. It's an awesome site.
Yeah, we're always finding new things. They've kept everything. I was going through a box a while back, a couple months ago, and I was finding receipts for boiler parts from the 1870s.
That's awesome.
They just kept everything.
You never know when you're going to need those.
Yeah.
True.
You just
There's
don't.
Life magazines from the 50s and Life magazines from the McKinley election. It's everything.
All of our CPA listeners are like, hold those receipts. You don't know. It's that time of the year. You don't know when you're going to need them.
I ran into a similar situation when I went to the Seward Museum up in New York at one point. Apparently, the Sewards kept everything. And that museum has receipts dating back to the Civil War and before. Just friggin' receipts.
Yeah, well, it's all good.
Well, you got to make sure that you have proof of purchase of Alaska because of all the saber rattling around there right
Good
now.
reference.
I was literally getting ready to say, well, good thing that they kept Alaska because that one worked out for us. So, all right, well, let's get into today. I'm excited. So I know a fair bit about Union Mills. I've been out there a bunch. Even before you worked there, I live here. I'm from this area naturally. The co-hosts of the show, the guests of the show are not native Marylanders, so I've had the good fortune of growing up in this region. I currently live in the county where this site is. So take it away, Kyle Dalton. Tell us about Union Mills Homestead. Where does it start? When they build the house? When the family's in the area? Where do we go?
We can go pretty far back. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version for the really far back.
All right, do that.
They are descended from a German immigrant, Schreiber, who comes here in the early 18th century, 1720s, I think. And then his grandchildren are the ones who found Union Mills. 1797, they're the sons of a local politician during the American Revolution. They are Andrew Kay and David Shriver. The name has been anglicized from Schreiber to Shriver.
So we went from
I wondered
B's
about
to
that.
V's.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Just easier to pronounce, I think. And they have an interesting relationship with the German community out there. They're often kind of the spokespeople for them. But in one private letter, Andrew K. Shriver is a little bit denigrating. He's like, they're really hard workers, but they're not the smartest people. And it's like, you're German. What are you talking about?
Those are your people.
Damn, the people of his people.
Yeah, exactly.
My goodness.
They are movers and shakers in the community, not just because they're there to represent the German community, but also because of political connections. Andrew is a justice of the peace. He's a magistrate. His brother David starts working on the National Road.
Oh, that's cool.
So these two, they establish Union Mills Homestead in 1797, and they build a 4-bedroom house together. There's a hallway through the middle that separates one family from the other. David's on one side, Andrew's on the other.
It's like, get on your side of the house and stay there. That's when they beef. When they're cool, you can walk down the hallway.
Good fences make great neighbors.
That's true.
That's true.
But they work hand in glove for a few years. It's a little unclear when exactly, but David moves away to start working on the National Road sometime in the 1800s, early 1800s. So Andrew then kind of takes over the site. He and his sons run the place. It's called Union Mills, and this will tie in later with our Civil War stuff. It's called Union Mills because it's a union of the two brothers. They share the house. It's two separate families working in conjunction to make this site work.
Does this area have a name prior to that? Because just knowing, again, for the special shout out to the one listener who hates how I always tie in the peripheral stuff I know. But the things I've learned recently doing a project at work, about relating to German migration and things like that. Like, there is a huge pipeline of people coming from the Palatinate area of Germany, things like that in this area. But a lot of them are coming through in the 1740s and 50s. The town we're broadcasting from is established in 1745 by a family very similar to what I described.
Right.
And that's about 50 or so years before this. And so I'm wondering if Union Mills has a name other than that prior to 97.
Or was there anything even there?
I'm a little unclear on that. They do buy it from someone else, from another
Sure.
Anglo or European who's living in the area. They finalized the deed in the last couple of weeks of the Washington administration, 1797, early 1797. But I'm not totally up on that history yet.
Okay.
We were just talking. I've only been on the ground on the job for
Hey,
8
that's our
months,
favorite thing to do, is be like, I don't know. We'll get back to you. We're learning.
Yeah.
Like, we're still learning.
We're
I'll post it in the
historians.
comments if I remember.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. Kyle, you're always welcome on the show. You can just call us and say, hey, got an answer, and we'll zoom it and put it out. We'll put it out
we
in
could do
5 seconds.
a really bad ADR over it of yes, it was called.
Chill. It was called Chill. The house was called Chill. No. Anyway, so I was just something that popped into my head because I knew
that's a
that.
good question.
Once upon a time, almost all of Frederick County was owned by Daniel Delaney, and then he started selling off all these massive tracts of land, and and they all have names and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's like,
And this is Frederick County at the time.
right.
You
That's
mentioned
why I
that
was wondering.
They were broadcasting from Carroll County. Carroll County isn't founded until 1837.
Right. That's
So
I didn't want
so
to
it is
nuance.
Frederick County.
I don't want to nuance the listeners too hard. We're only 20 minutes into the
This
show.
is a
at this
history
point.
podcast, man. If they don't want nuance, they got to go somewhere else.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
Especially with this show.
It's true. It's true. So all right, cool. So we'll figure out the name of Union Mills prior to the brothers at some other time.
Sure.
But it's 1797. They establish this some point. Which brother moves on?
David does.
David says-
So it's Andrew Kay. Confusingly, Andrew's father is also Andrew Kay. His son is Andrew Kay.
All right, stop.
And
it.
his son's nephew is Andrew Kay.
Stop it.
Yep.
The
This
Shrivers. If you have the last name Shriver right now, stop naming your children Andrew K.
Sounds like the Thomases and Frederick. They do the same thing with
Stop.
Christian
Yes.
Kiefer.
Just
Yes.
stop doing it.
It's the Hillary Mantel Wolf Hall thing. All the world is named Thomas.
Yep.
Oh man. So yeah, Andrew is still there. To backpedal a little bit, the reason they put the house there is the geography. It runs along a creek, and that creek allows them to build a grist mill, which still exists today. The grist mill still stands. It's a brick grist mill. On the other side was a sawmill, and eventually they established a tannery to provide belts for the mill. And that tannery really takes off. That is the thing that they make their name on as the century progresses. 1876, they win an award at the Philadelphia World's Fair for their leather. So they're doing real well.
You make fine leather goods.
Yeah.
Hey, it's gross work, but it is very profitable work if you're willing to do it.
Yeah. We had a great interview with Barry Knight. He's this leather maker from England, and he travels the world just making historic leather. He worked on an underwater excavation of a ship that sank with a load of leather. Really cool stuff.
That is cool.
But he was able to fill in a lot of the gaps for me on like, how does this work exactly? Does it smell that bad? It does smell that bad.
It does.
From what I understand.
I don't have a ton of experience, but what I do, it's horrible.
The location also is right along main thoroughfare, and because his brothers work in the National Road, he can really kind of emphasize that thoroughfare.
I was wondering about that.
It becomes a major junction for heading into Pennsylvania, because it's pretty close to the Pennsylvania line. It's 7 miles south of the Pennsylvania line, and so they established a post office there too.
Oh, nice.
As you do when you are a business person in late 18th, early 19th century Maryland, they also open a tavern in the house.
Of course.
So they've got a gristmill, a sawmill, a tannery, a post office, a tavern, and as just the piece, he's running court out of his house. He has a separate office that he holds inquests and stuff at. So they are busy people.
They've got the town just to themselves.
Like I was going to say, they are the town.
Yeah. There is a town established nearby, which is for Marylanders confusingly called Myersville.
Yes.
It is later renamed to Union Mills, which is confusing for researching Union Mills.
Right.
So, but again, the names in this are kind of a mess.
For a minute, I forgot all of this was in actual buildings outside, and I thought we were still in the upstairs hallway. That was when it's like the door 2 down is the jail, the door across from me is the office. It's like there's a lot of infrastructure happening very quickly. So how are they getting all this done? Like, is this a family that is brought the extended family with them? Are they paying laborers, or do they own enslaved individuals? Like, how is all this happening?
Question.
There are some enslaved individuals there. Research into that is ongoing. When our museum was founded in the 1950s, 60s, it was intended to be a Civil War museum. We've since exploded that because there's so much to cover. Again, these guys established the Homestead in the last couple of weeks of the Washington administration, and it becomes a museum. The park is handed over to the county in the 1950s. So we're talking Washington administration to Eisenhower administration, that there are people there doing things.
Same family.
6 generations of the same family.
That's incredible.
And again, they kept everything. So we've got incredible records that we're only just scratching the surface of right now. This is an iceberg of research.
I'm excited. Watch out. Good thing our producer's not here. You talk about icebergs. He gets very sensitive. His favorite ship is just over my shoulder here. He gets very nervous if you say iceberg.
He does.
I got to earmuffs him when he listens to this for QC. Like, Parker, at about the 17 mark. Shh, just cover your ears.
And it's not always easy to do this research because they're often writing about the things that are important to them in the moment. They're usually the first people in the county to learn about something because they are the post office. And in the early 20th century, they're one of the first places to get a telephone. They get information immediately.
Is that similar with the wire? When the wire comes through in the 1860s, they're one of the first people to get a telegraph station?
You know, I'm not actually sure about the telegraph. That's another good question.
Did I wake up and have my Wheaties? Am I asking good questions today? Like, what's happening, dude?
You are killing it.
I knew Kyle was coming. I was like, I got to get A game ready.
That's true. And he's taking notes. He's going to find this stuff out.
He's like, I'm never coming on this show. They ask me too many damn questions.
So to go back to the enslaved people question, we are still conducting research that wasn't really done because their focus was just these 4 years out of 160, and especially 48 hours, which we'll talk about later.
Okay.
But we have dug up some really interesting stuff since then. We found a letter from 1802 that goes into incredible detail about the first enslaved family brought there. We've always had access to census records. We always knew the numbers were pretty small. This letter and what we know about the enslaved family that's there during the Civil War, they seem to confirm that these are domestic enslaved people. They're living in the house. We have the dwelling place where they lived. We have sketches on the walls that were drawn during the Civil War by the enslaved people.
Oh, wow.
We have a photograph of one of them. We have a letter written by one of them during the Civil War.
Jeez, that's huge.
So we've got incredible research on these folks, and now it's our job to
do it.
Yeah. to figure out how to translate that and how to convey it. And we just discovered this letter last year from 1802. Abraham Shriver, brother of Andrew and David, is in Frederick proper, Frederick City. And he buys enslaved people from the old Governor Johnson. And he sends them to Union Mills. And he is incredibly detailed on like how old they are, where they came from, what their names are. It's a whole family, Minta and her children and her husband, who is free. And he says, you can employ him if you want. He is looking for work, but I'll leave that up to you. So we know that they are using paid labor as well as enslaved labor. But most of the work is probably being done by freed people just because, again, the census records, the numbers are small enough and we have enough detail about those two families to know that most of them are children.
Sure.
So they're probably not working in the grist mill. They're probably not working in the tannery. And there's too many businesses going on at once for them to be spread thin across all of them and doing all of them. So probably there's paid labor there as well. It seems like they were trying to get indentured servants early on. Max Grivno in his book does a good job of digging into that. And he says they have a lot of trouble getting any indentured servant, and a lot of them just run away. So they kind of fall back on enslaved people as their domestic work.
Sure.
And then probably they're using paid labor for the grist mill and that kind of thing. Certainly by the Civil War, it's paid labor. It's their neighbors. Right. We have their names, too. A lot of them are written about in this book, Pastimes.
So I'll ask this now because maybe it won't naturally come up later in the conversation if the research is still ongoing. 1864, Maryland paves the way, becomes the first state to constitutionally abolish slavery, right? So do you know offhand how the Shrivers interact with that moment? Because if they own individuals come, November of 1864, that is now illegal in this state. Is that a problem? Is it a willful, like, okay, this is the new world and we're cool with it? Like, is there any insight onto how that moment in time happens for this family?
No. And that's what's really frustrating. They oftentimes major events will happen and they just won't write about them. Sometimes that's because I've missed something. So for an example, I was looking at Prohibition. One of the residents of the house was the chair of the Carroll County Anti-Prohibition Committee. And so I went into his he went before Congress in 1922 and all but bragged about making hard cider on site and said, I've never seen a Treasury official or a cop come by. Go ahead and try to stop me. He is in the halls of Congress saying this. So I go to his journals to be like, okay, well, what does he say when the Volstead Act gets passed? What does he say when Maryland ratifies the Prohibition Amendment? And nothing. There's not a thing. And clearly it's a thing he cares about. He just isn't writing about it. And then I realized that's because Carroll County passed Prohibition early. They passed it in 1915.
Did they?
That's interesting.
Yes. They
so
passed
it's
it
old
early.
news for him.
It's old news for him. So it kind of doesn't matter what's happening on the national level because the fact is that it's still happening.
So what I'm hearing is you're either missing it in the diary because you're like, oh, I got to go back to the 1915 era, or you're looking at maybe one of two other options. Maybe there's another diary you don't know about. Maybe it's a diary called Things I'm Pissed About. or I will freely admit this is an assumption, a speculation. Like, you ever just been so pissed you can't think about something, write about it? Like,
definitely.
And it's like when you said no about the 1864 question I asked, and then also you're telling me about like Volstead Act. It's like maybe when the dude is mad, he just doesn't write about it.
Now, and it's unclear what. So
I'm speculating. Like I have no like insight into that.
Well, that's what we have to do at this point is speculate because the records are quiet.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing with the Titanic. They must be the first people to hear about this. They're the ones distributing the news for the area. They have a telephone by 1912.
Oh, that is interesting.
And yet, you go to the diary, April 15th, 1912, and for the next 2 weeks following, no mention of the Titanic.
Really?
Wow.
And that's a big deal for national news, but for them,
it's a big deal for this county.
I mean, literally, the first Titanic memorial ever made anywhere is in Frederick County. Like, people don't even realize that. Like, the first one on all of planet Earth is in Liberty Town.
Yep.
And it was put up with 7 days or less after the sinking.
Wow.
It was
Dang.
St. Peter the Apostle Catholic Church is right there front and center. It's a huge cavalry cross. But anyway, I digress. So, like, this area, no reason, no connection. Everybody's talking about it.
Right.
So this is random that they
just don't mention it. Now, the day the Titanic sank, April 15, 1912, they are in Washington, D.C., basically on vacation. And he's an avid photographer, so he's talking about all the photos he got. So, like, I don't know if they were just like, I've got other things going on. I'm not connected to it. Who knows?
DC was a buzz.
Yeah,
like that's also crazy. You know what? I am just flabbergasted because try to imagine our lives, right? Try to imagine like for 12 days after 9/11, just not mentioning it.
Yeah.
Just not saying, not acknowledging it.
It's pretty wild. So we have a similar thing. I went to, because I'm still working my way through all these records. And again, this book is very thick.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I went to the passage of, or the announcement of the Emancipation Proclamation. I went to the enactment of the Emancipation Proclamation. I went to the date that the new Maryland Constitution was signed that had emancipation. Nothing. They don't mention any of it.
That's crazy.
So I don't know what's going on. I do know that the enslaved people worked there for a little while longer, and they are paid after the war. So my assumption is, and again, this is an assumption, maybe I just haven't found something yet. I haven't gotten to that part. But my assumption is that the transition was so gradual that it kind of didn't matter. Again, most of their labor is paid anyway.
Right.
And eventually this family, the Dolan family or Dewar family, their names are spelled two different ways, they eventually do move away. They move to Baltimore. Some of their descendants still live in Carroll County. Some of their descendants live in Baltimore. So certainly it is a big deal, and we don't have their words about it. We just have the Shriver's words about it, and they just don't really say much.
Have you ever had the descendants come back to the site?
Not while I've been there. I know that there have been efforts to reach out to them. I've been involved in the past with an organization called Coming to the Table, which is intended to bring together descendants of enslaved people and the people who enslaved them.
Oh.
And it's kind of like a way of starting a conversation.
It can be emotionally very heavy.
It is very heavy. It can be very heavy on both sides, for sure. There are a lot of people who don't want to face, some pretty heavy guilt that they might feel for what their ancestors did. And there are other people who are feeling that the descendants of enslaved people, especially, it's not their place to tell someone that it's okay that their ancestors did something.
Yeah,
it's kind of a weird...
Well, legacies are hard. Like, on a very national level, it's not so much a major story anymore because the movie has been out for a while, but Killers of the Flower Moon highlighted that there's a very famous lifestyle personality out there, the Pioneer Woman. Very famous. You might not know her except for her flaming red hair. Catches every eye in the world. It's the reddest hair I've ever seen in my life. But her and her husband, very famous for like Midwestern lifestyle food things. He, Mr. Pioneer Man, is his grandfather is one of the people that had to like sponsor and likely, based on the evidence available that we can see, like very likely took advantage of indigenous peoples out west and like took over their land and their finances, and basically that whole story of Killers of the Flower Moon is like directly related to this Pioneer Woman, and it's like how are they responsible, right? They are the grandchildren of that, but like they've been taking media flack. It's like, but it got me thinking about this conversation of legacies. So there's a whole organization I had no idea existed.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Coming to the Table.
Coming to the Table.
There's a couple of books written by its founder that are pretty good that I would recommend. We are just starting this process. Again, there's a lot of research to be done. We know there's a whole other family there that we just discovered last year.
Oh, wow.
And we don't even have their last name yet. So there's all kinds of stuff we're still digging up, but certainly slavery is a key part of the history of Union Mills Homestead.
Sure.
Again, even if it's not the majority of labor, the thing that frees up the family to have the entrepreneurial spirit that they do to create all of these things is they don't have to do the dishes. They don't have to do the cooking. They don't have to, they can if they want to, but they don't have to. And it gives them the freedom to do a lot of stuff that they do otherwise.
Right.
So again, it's a little more complicated than it would be if it was, say, a big plantation in the South, but in the deep South. But
that one's a bit cut and dry.
That was a bit cut and dry, but it's still there. It's still present, and it's still something that we're exploring.
Especially because we're in a region of Maryland that has a very, we could call it in a modern sense, a purple relationship with enslavement. You get out more towards the eastern shore, the Chesapeake Bay, southern Maryland, and that's where you can start to see kind of the things that you would recognize in deeper parts of the South. I mean, that's more to the plantation and strictly agriculturally based sort of industry. Up here...
Well, and that's a point I wanted to touch on, Pat, because I'm curious if maybe the enslaved population is so small at Union Mills is because of its proximity to Pennsylvania.
That could be.
It's 7 miles from the border.
Yeah.
You've got a very direct route to a free state. You also have the influence of Pennsylvania in this part of the state.
The Union Mills is pretty tied to Gettysburg.
Well
Before the Civil War.
Say we're going to find that out.
But well before the Civil War,
Yeah.
you're having a lot of interchange between them. The Gettysburg Star newspaper runs a letter from their committee to elect William Henry Harrison, thanking Union Mills for providing campaign flags.
Oh, right on.
So like, there's a definite relationship there. I'm often finding articles in Gettysburg newspapers before the Civil War about Union Mills.
That's because we're jumping all over the map. I'm like, my brain is like, I want to get back to this, but I have all these questions right now. So last question, then we can jump back into the moving Union Mills through the timeline.
Sure.
Unless you have a question, Matt. I don't want to speak for you there, bud. With the Shriver family also being established in Gettysburg for you, Eric, my friend out there listening. Gettysburg, is I guess the reason the newspapers are writing about it is because the Shrivers are also a big family in Adams County. Or are they not? Because they have, today we can go to the Shriver House Museum.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool museum.
Exactly.
And
that's the
we
same
do have
family.
a relationship with them, but we actually don't know yet for sure if they're the same family.
Wait,
Really?
What are the
That's
odds?
crazy. They're so close together.
Right.
They're descended from German immigrants in the same region in the early 18th century, but we don't yet know if they're related. So actually, we're running a project now to get genetic testing done on descendants of both Shriver families to see if there is a genetic relationship between the two.
Call Maria and be like, yo, Maria Shriver, you're available since Arnold's not around anymore. We need some DNA.
Well, this one
Shake your head at me.
this one relies on the male chromosome, so the testing has to be done through males.
All right, dig up Sergeant Shriver.
So yeah, we'll get back to.
right.
I know we're jumping all over the place because there's so much to talk about.
That's why, I think I did this when I came out to the walk around tour with you. I was like, what about this? And just started asking random
We
questions.
ended up talking about the Alamo at one
That's
point.
what I mean. Like we were in some like World War I era room and talking about the Alamo, and I was like, these don't match, but it's right. It's right. So okay.
I'm so shocked to hear that, Pat.
Hopefully for the listeners out there who live with ADHD like I do, this show tracks for you because it tracks for my brain, and you know what that's like. So, all right. So Union Mills, obviously, just to get us back on track, right? Founded very tail end of the 18th century by some brothers. They have split off from each other, but the one's working on the road. We built this road. All this cool stuff's happening. We're into the early 19th century.
Yes. So
and I forget when we sort of left off with that because we got so
talked about the growth of industry there, the
Right,
tannery,
right,
the
right,
sawmill,
right.
the grist mill.
And I was asking how all that happened really fast.
And that is largely the project of Andrew Kay, son of Andrew Kay.
Who is the grandfather
founder
of Andrew Kay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And
so we're clear.
So the founder of the site has numerous children, but the two that are most important to us are William and Andrew.
Okay.
William and Andrew are brothers. They live there. Their father passes away in 1847, so that Andrew's out of the picture.
All right.
William moves out to literally across the street. He builds a home there. They call him Uncle Billy, at least in one source.
Nice.
William has a lot of daughters and 3 sons there. I think 5 daughters and 3 sons. And he establishes just a house across the street, but still is involved in the businesses that Andrew is running. So he's still involved in the tannery, still involved in the grist mill. And this is where it gets really interesting for the Civil War, because these two brothers have separated loyalties.
Oh.
That's the kind of stuff you always see in novels in the Civil War, and then when you do the research on it, you're like, that never happens.
That's right. Right.
So they're too old to fight. Neither of them gets in uniform, and nor would they have been allowed to by the time the Civil War breaks out. But the brother who's actually at the homestead, Andrew, is a Unionist, a staunch Unionist. William, across the street, is a staunch secessionist.
When this moment in time is erupting, are they, like, how far back in the family correspondence and records can you see these split loyalties? 1850s? Like, are we talking...
We just went through a bunch of 1850s letters up through 1858, and there's not a lot in there. There's not much to indicate that this split is coming. It seems like the election of Lincoln was really where things exploded. That's where it seems like the family truly split.
Do they go quiet on John Brown, too?
I'm not
You said
sure.
58, so you weren't quite too
yeah,
Brown.
I haven't gotten to those records
Right.
yet. I would be very interested to hear what they have to say about John Brown, but I haven't found them yet.
It's just kind of baffling to me that in this era when keeping journals and diaries was so common, You know, because right now we have blogs and Facebooks and Instagrams, and we're all doing the same thing, but we don't realize it's the same thing, just happening in a different way. But we're chronicling our lives, right? So in an era where they're doing this all the time, it just is so baffling that they're not commenting on the major stuff happening. Again, I'm going to go back to 9/11. Imagine if you wrote a diary entry on 9/11 and you wrote, "It was sunny today."
Yeah.
And like that was it.
And now, to be fair, they do often comment on things. There's just gaps.
But like
there's things that disappear
on these hugely important things. It's like, how is this a gap? Like, how is there
or
a gap
within a couple
here?
days of it?
Now, I also think that in this case, when it comes to divided loyalties, there's a lot of arguing that's happening in person.
Oh yeah,
You're
or
often
across the
seeing,
street.
yeah, you're often seeing in the letters like had another argument with William today, stuff like that. Where like I get the feeling that it's kind of like I don't really want to get into it right now. I just had an hour of this.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that kind of thing, and that's one thing that's been difficult is tracking down why they are on opposite sides, because so much of it is being done in person orally, and they're not writing down as it's happening what they're arguing about. But we can infer from some sources.
All right.
So if we go to the to William's family, the secessionists, often it's much more implied than outright said. They're not saying, I am supporting secession because of this reason. Instead, they'll say things like, this is a letter from Christopher Columbus Shriver, one of William's sons, to Frederick Austin Shriver, one of Andrew's sons. So from a secessionist to a Unionist cousin. He says, it is a thing I cannot comprehend how any honest man who believes in a just God and has read Jefferson Davis's proclamation is not with the South. So he's saying this document that I didn't write is representing my views.
Right.
So if we go to Jefferson's proclamation, he says, with the Constitution differing only from that of our fathers, insofar as it is explanatory of their well-known intent, freed from sectional conflicts, yada, yada, yada. You guys know what the only difference is between the Confederate Constitution and
how it views slavery.
Exactly.
Right.
But you have to make a couple of leaps to get there from that one sentence in that letter. He's not outright saying it's about slavery. He's saying, I agree with Jefferson Davis's proclamation. Jefferson Davis's proclamation says this thing, and you have to know about the Confederate Constitution to actually make that connection.
Well, so we have the luxury of 160 years of this already being behind us and study and learning.
Right.
So it's common for us to quickly know this
Yes.
difference. But in real time, how aware were they of the wordage, verbiage, or like intention, spirit of these documents? Like,
and probably pretty aware. These are a pretty educated family, but
that's
it
my
is
point.
us making, we have to make those connections. We have to make those leaps. And again, they're not often outright saying it's about slavery.
Right.
The best thing that we get actually is a letter that's in a response to Christopher Columbus Shriver. I think actually in response to that letter from Frederick Austin. And he says, the Supreme Court has decided they, the southern states, can take slaves to the territories. And at this very time, they can take them to any territory they please and nobody can stop them. I admit the Crittenden Compromise would have been a wise measure on the part of the North, but the South ought not to complain. The Constitution has not been broken in regards to the Fugitive Slave Act. It has not been executed as well as it should have been, but as well as could be under the circumstances. Under Lincoln's administration, he underlines this, under Lincoln's administration, it has been executed better than ever before. So he's the Unionist. This is 1861.
Okay.
June 30th, 1861 is when he writes this letter. So this is very early in the war.
we haven't even gotten into Manassas yet.
Right. And he's saying not, I'm abolitionist, I'm anti-slavery. He's saying, you've got nothing to complain about.
Right.
What are you whining about? We can still have slaves.
Right.
So,
which is essentially what Lincoln says in his inaugural address.
Right. So it's an interesting dichotomy between these two families where they're both kind of arguing pro-slavery points, not vociferously. Again, there's not a ton of them saying it is about slavery. There's a lot of implication of that. And the other side that complicates this is William, the secessionist, by 1860 no longer has any enslaved people. And Andrew, the Unionist, does.
Well, yeah, because this is supposed to be confusing.
Right.
So it's not cut and dry in the traditional sense of like the Union is against slavery, the Confederacy is for slavery.
Right.
In this case, what we're seeing, the records are implying strongly the secessionist family is very pro-slavery, but so is the Unionist family. It's a very complicated thing. And of course, the voices being left out of this are the enslaved people. We have one letter written by an enslaved person who's here at the time, and it's not about any of this. It's about her experiences going to town to get supplies for the family.
Which town? Westminster?
Yes, Westminster.
All right, cool.
Westminster is just south of us for listeners who don't know.
Yes.
Just south of Union Mills.
Everybody in this room knows this area, so we're all just like, the map in your brain? You know the map in your brain? Yeah. Sorry if you're not from here.
This break between the families is accelerated by the militarization of the Civil War. Andrew's sons joined the Confederacy. Lum, Christopher Columbus Shriver, and that nephew, Andrew Kaiser Shriver. He goes by Kai, and we're just going to use that for the rest of the time because that makes it way easier than confusing the two Andrews. And this is where we get one of the interesting moments that recontextualizes Union Mills. As much as I wanted to emphasize that Union Mills has a long history stretching out in either direction from the Civil War is undoubtedly a pivot point. It totally recontextualizes the site, and the family remembers this for the rest of their lives, and even their descendants do. And what happens is Kai flees in the middle of the night, disappears without telling his family where he's going, and then writes a letter from Richmond, Virginia saying, I joined up.
I'm in the AMB, yo.
And he writes a letter to his cousin, the unionist at Union Mills, and he says, if only you were here, you would understand. You would be with me. You would join the Confederacy as well. And interestingly, the envelope was kept. It's addressed to him, and it says Union Mills, Maryland. And as a passive-aggressive response, he underlined Union in Union Mills twice on the envelope.
Damn.
And this is eventually, probably shortly after the Civil War, they have a motto for their flour that is, in union is strength.
That's good.
And we'll hear again about what union means as a word for these folks.
Just going to rub that one in for a generation or two.
We've got in our collection a whiskey flask that was produced only from 1861 to 1863 in Pittsburgh. And it's a Union whiskey flask. It has Union across the top of it. It's got clasped hands on one side, a cannon and an American flag on the other. And this is like very clean. They kept this for 150 years, and they kept it very clean because they were very proud of this whiskey flask that promoted the Union.
It always sat in that one window that they could see across the street. Just make sure it's always shiny so they can see it.
Do we know what unit or units they joined up with? Were they joining one of these developing Confederate Maryland units?
Kai does not.
Okay.
Kai, actually, he writes about this in the letter. He says, I hold the rank of, the office of and rank as supporting surgeon, which is equal to rank of captain in the field. And as my duties have nothing to do with active service as a surgeon, I am not called upon in that capacity. I am in reality a support medical purveyor. So he's doing acquisitions for the Confederate Medical Department. He's not an MD. He doesn't seem to practice medicine, and he's just there doing the job of getting medical supplies.
He's a supply officer. He's kind of like an S4, but focused on medicine stuff.
Yeah, which is very important for the Confederacy in this period.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
His younger brother ends up in a very interesting combat situation, but we're going to jump forward to Gettysburg so we can get there.
Excellent. Yeah, like the meat and potatoes of this story.
Yes. Yeah. So what we got Lee's invasion of the North, second invasion of the North. His army is kind of spreading across Maryland in different routes to get up there. And one branch of it is Jeb Stuart's cavalry, famously not with the main body.
Indeed.
I think I've heard this story before.
They come through Union Mills, and they arrive in the middle of the night. The first person to see them is the enslaved woman Ruth. Her dwelling place is in the garret, the attic. And it still exists today. You can look out the window onto what would have been the main road back then.
Wow.
And she sees them coming down the road. Now, earlier in the day, a couple of Union cavalrymen came by and were like, Lee's army is on the way. You guys need to get out of here. And it seems like they only kind of believed them. There were a lot of false alarms in 62 and 63. So I think that they were kind of like, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But when they arrive at, midnight, there's only so much you could do.
Right.
So Ruth runs downstairs and starts cooking out of the kitchen. And as one story describes it, she opened two doors, and the Confederate cavalry could come through, pick up flapjacks, and then walk out the other door. And I think that's her, playing for time, trying to get on their good side, trying to play to a certain role, trying to appease them and get them going. Because the rest of the family kind of buckles down. Andrew's family is Unionist. They're well known to be Unionists. And this is something that they're worried about being targeted for. So a lot of the family kind of bunkers down, tries to kind of, keep the house on lockdown. But Andrew, this older man, walks into the middle of the street and confronts the cavalry.
Yes.
And famously declares, "I am a Union man."
My
Again,
man.
that Union coming back.
Yeah, my man.
There's some of the sources say that they were going to drag him away, that they were going to arrest him. But his daughter later writes, Kate later writes, that she clung to his leg and sobbed until they let him go. So things get a little dicey there.
I'll tell you what, that is a man of principle, and I respect that. I mean, that takes courage to face that many dudes. They're armed, and we don't even know if he went out there armed himself.
He did not.
Right.
Probably smart.
That was just an act of bravery, straight up. I wouldn't have believed the warnings either. The Confederate Army, Lee's army is coming, because in '62, if you had told me that, my brain would be more inclined to believe that, because if the Shrivers are as plugged in as they are, right, they're probably aware in '62 that Lee's army is just a county away, sitting right underneath them. That would make me nervous. In '63, being the same connected family, Lee's army is in like Pennsylvania at this point. They're above you and west of you, and they're I think I would have been like, okay, cool, thanks. Like I had been like, I obviously know Lee's army's up there, like we've been hearing about.
Yeah.
I think at that point, for a couple of days, I think it was aware that Lee was not in Virginia anymore. So I think I would have done just like her and been like, no, I'm not. Okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah. And there does seem to be kind of a general panic in the neighborhood. The local blacksmith hides in the wheel of their sawmill. Of their grist mill overnight.
Oh, because he doesn't want to. Is he a Union man too? I mean, that would make sense.
Most of the neighborhood is Unionist.
So they don't want to work on Confederate shoes. I mean, not not the soldier shoes, the horse shoes, right? You don't want to do ferrying work.
Carroll County is majority Unionist at the time.
What changed? I mean, I'm sorry. We'll get into that a different day.
There are some, obviously Kai being one of them, that serves in the Confederacy, but there are far more casualties of the U.S. Army than there are of the Confederate Army coming from Carroll County.
Okay.
Again, it's Maryland, so you're always going to have some.
Sure.
But it's definitely not like some regions of Maryland that are much more secessionist.
Right.
So there are a lot of Unionists in the neighborhood, and the chickens will come home to roost on that for Williams' family.
Okay.
But for now, Williams' family is sitting pretty high. They get to host Jeb Stuart and his staff officers at their house. The ladies ply them with dinner. They dance and sing.
Oh my.
They have a great time.
As Jeb likes to do.
He does. That he does. When it comes to Union Mills itself, though, being fairly unionist, are there any accounts of things being taken? You said there's blacksmiths in the area. These are supplies that cavalry need. They have their own farriers with them. They can always use more tongs and hammers and nails and other...
That's right.
Yeah, there's definitely destruction that happens there.
Okay.
Lewis Shriver, writing in 1930, a good while later, he was a child at the time, but he distinctly remembers crops and fences were destroyed by the visit of the two armies at Union Mills, and the country around about after they had departed presented a pretty fair picture of what a battlefield might look like.
Oh, wow.
They got pretty tore up.
I was going to say,
Sounds
not even
like it.
fight. They just picked the area dry.
Yes. There's a lot of talk about hiding horses. This is Confederate cavalry, after all.
Yeah.
And they're
definitely.
moving fast. They
Yep.
want those horses. So a lot of people are trying to hide horses. A lot of fences are knocked down and cattle go free. There's a lot of farmers complaining about other people's cattle getting into their crops. It's a pretty wild time for that half day or so. The Confederate cavalry again is moving. So they stop. They have enough time to have fun with Williams' family, and they take with them his youngest son, who I think is only 16 at the time, maybe younger, T. Herbert Shriver. T. Herbert Shriver later becomes a major politician for the state of Maryland, but for now he's just a kid, and they want a guide to lead them up to Gettysburg. Again, Union Mills and Gettysburg are pretty well connected. This kid knows how to get there.
Yeah.
So he joins them. His brother Kai eventually writes for him to, so he leaves with the cavalry, and he's gone for the rest of the Gettysburg story. But his brother Kai later writes to VMI and gets him in.
Oh,
And
wow.
he winds up on the field with the VMI cadets.
No.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Crazy.
This is a pretty wild journey for this kid.
Dude, this family, like, what am I thinking? It's like Forrest Gump, right? You're somehow part of every moment. It's like
kind of true.
Here, randomly, he's going to go to VMI, and guess what? In May of '64, you know, he's on the field of lawsuits.
And that's true of like all American history in Maryland. I have this great letter from the 1820s where one of the brothers is saying, "Hey, can you send me some money? Francis Scott Key smoked all my tobacco."
That's awesome.
It's not a little name. It's not a little name.
I didn't even realize that VMI was still taking in students, though, during the war. I always assumed it was the class that was pretty much there when the war broke out.
It could be that an exception was made. I'm not privy, of course, to VMI history, but this is a fairly prominent Maryland family.
Good point.
And the Confederacy is constantly trying to convince itself that Maryland is more secessionist than it is.
Right, exactly.
So I'm thinking that's probably a big part of it. But he winds up out there, and the Confederate cavalry moves on. Mm-hmm. Just a few hours later, Union First Corps shows up. And the tables are flipped. I had a quote here.
Wait, the First Corps?
Yeah, your boy goes marching through there.
How does the First Corps get here if they're coming up through Frederick County? Wouldn't it be the Second or the Sixth Corps?
General Barnes.
Barnes. Oh God, you're asking me to do my battlefield
James Barnes
structure.
You'd think that in a room
structure?
of 3 history nerds we would know.
Oh, but that's not. Yeah, but command structure's never been my thing.
That's true.
I'm
not
atmospheric storyteller.
General James Barnes.
I know where we're sitting. Second Corps goes right over top of us, or very near us. I know Fifth Corps clips us out to our east.
I think it's probably
because the Fifth Corps is in Taneytown.
It starts with an F and an I.
It's Fifth.
It's Fifth.
Okay,
it's Fifth Corps.
Because First Corps, because Reynolds and those guys go right up modern day 85 in Frederick.
Yeah.
I mean,
they go right past my house.
Yeah, I mean, they go straight up 85.
Yeah, as soon as you said they went through Frederick, I was like, oh, I'm wrong.
Yeah. No. The only reason I know that is because as much fun as I poke at John Reynolds, and if you've been listening to the show for years, I like to poke fun at him because of his notable absence during the Battle of Fredericksburg. Like, where were you? You know, Meade needed you. But he has a really...
Barnes is in Union Mills, assuming you were about to say. That's what.
Anyway,
quick check is.
Short version. Reynolds misses a dinner date or a lunch date with a cousin of his, and was like, "We'll catch up." And then obviously he's killed. Now that always bums me out. So as much fun as I poke at him, I know that he's in Frederick because he misses that sad moment. So all right, so Barnes is in Union Mills.
He's in the homestead itself.
Okay.
Wow.
Just like William and his family had Fitzhugh Lee and Jeb Stuart in their house.
Right.
They have General Barnes and his staff. They get along very well. They also have a big party. They sing "When This Cruel War Is Over" like you do.
Right.
We still have the song sheet actually. It's on display in our museum.
That's cool.
In the
really
music room
cool.
where they were entertained. So they're having a great old time.
Oh, I think you showed me this when I was there because the piano is
piano's out there and there's a bunch of musical instruments.
That's interesting. If it's what I'm thinking of, it's not a normal looking piano, or maybe
I think it's piano forte.
Yeah.
Yeah. But General Barnes goes and he hangs out with them. They have a great time. They give him their dog, the family dog. They give it to one of his staff officers.
Why?
So he can go join the army. The dog got along really well with his captain. And they march off with him. And apparently he would write back to them and give them updates on the service of their dog.
I need to know right now, does this dog survive the war?
I have not found the letters that he wrote back. I really hope so. It's a setter named Frank.
I'm going to be living in anxiety until we get an answer on this.
There are a lot of dogs at the homestead. We have so many photographs from the late 19th and early 20th century of dogs.
Really?
We have a photo of a pet cemetery where they buried their dogs.
Wow.
Oh.
They were really into dogs at this house.
You know what? That's cool, but I couldn't give up my dog like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like,
right.
you guys have a lot of dogs or something? What's this about?
That ain't going to happen to me.
So the script is flipped. General Barnes is hanging out with them, having a grand old time, and William's family now buckles down.
Yeah, they're just glaring at each other across the street.
So William's family really only got a few hours to be top dog, and then for days afterward, maybe weeks afterward.
Yeah, because the Federal Army
is moving through. And they're coming back down
Right.
during and after the battle. The Williams family is having kind of a weird time. So they are, again, well known to be secessionists.
Right.
And oftentimes in the sources, they'll say that stragglers or even main bodies of infantry will say, we've heard about you. There's kind of
they're
a
talking
threatening
smack.
tone as they're going by.
Interesting.
Like when you get to that road, this side of the street, cool. That side of the street, not cool.
Among his daughters, there are different strategies on how to deal with this.
Oh my.
Are we about to tell some fun stories?
So Sarah Clementine Shriver writes in a letter during the Battle of Gettysburg. She said, "We have much trouble to keep Margaret quiet. Today we have all been pretty well scared, but yesterday she would say to the soldiers, 'Do you think you will cook the rebels this time?' If they answered yes, she would reply, 'You do? Well, it would be the first time.'"
Damn. Sick burn.
Ouch.
Except you already lost an Antietam.
say,
So
yeah,
that's,
there's
that's,
that.
Not
That's
true,
unwarranted.
but yeah.
That's unwarranted.
The family does get threatened pretty severely. There's another letter by Sarah Clementine Shriver. She says, "There have been streams of stragglers all the morning, and we find they are much to be dreaded. Just now one came to the gate and said he wanted a drink of milk and water. Margaret took a pot of milk, a tumbler, and a big pitcher of water. He was drunk and immediately became very abusive, swearing awfully. Frank was sitting on the porch, but did not say a word. He swore at him, pointed his gun at him, and snapped it. Frank ran in and shut the door. After abusing us for a while and saying he had been told about us," again, there we have one of those references, "he broke the pitcher, tumbler, and milk pot and then left. Since then, they have been coming, almost all wanting whiskey. We have locked up the front of the house. Molly is watching at one of the windows. We are on the back porch upstairs."
He dry fired his musket at them?
Yeah.
Sounds like
Dude, what a psycho.
Yeah.
Right. There's kind of a lot of stuff like that through this story. William's family is heavily harassed. It gets bad enough that they assign a provost marshal to the houses.
wow.
Well, look, can I just say this? Like, don't play stupid games. You won't win stupid prizes.
Now, to be fair, this drug guy probably didn't really know anything about this family.
Right.
He hears like, "Oh, we've been told about you," but probably he just knows they're secessionists.
Right.
Right.
Does he know that their brothers are serving? Does he know that they hosted Jeb Stuart? He's just a drunk guy who wants whiskey. So
Do we know any more about that interaction? Like, is that, like,
not really. That's the main
does
source.
that guy
for
catch
it.
up to the army and get chided for being drunk?
Well, we do have other stuff. So Andrew, the elder Andrew, writes on July 4th, "A cavalryman shot through the hip who was in the act of anarchy here." This is the Unionist household. So even they're catching some stuff.
Sure.
There's a little bit more detail. Frederick Austin Shriver writes about this, one of his sons. "There was a soldier shot right in front of the mill this morning by another who he had come to arrest. He was shot through the thigh. The ball passed on to and struck the mill about 2 feet from the door where Dave Kiefer was standing." Dave Kiefer's one of their paid laborers in the mill. "People did not seem to think anything of it. I did not see the affair as I was over in town looking at rebel prisoners."
Just looking at them?
Yeah, he just went to town to go
He's
see
like,
what they look
you
like.
want to go see the show today?
It's like, you guys just saw a bunch of
Ooh.
Confederate soldiers. I don't know why you need to go out of your way for
Yeah, but this one's from Alabama. They look different.
Kate, writing in the 20th century, remembers, "One day a drunken soldier was making trouble in front of the mill, and someone got an officer to come over and take charge of him. The drunken man shot and killed the officer." That is not true, but that's what she remembers. She was a kid at the time.
Sure.
We actually know the guy who shot him. His name is John Thatcher. He was a provost marshal. He was a cavalryman assigned there. And he was basically living in the house. He was the third provost marshal to be assigned there. The second one was too drunk to do any good.
Great.
So they assigned this guy. And there's a great, here we go. Sarah Clementine Shriver writes about him. Again, William's daughter across the street, because this guy's assigned to both houses. "Our present provost marshal is Mr. John Thatcher, a Philadelphian and jeweler by trade. Quite young, rather pretentious in his manner, talks smart, and is somewhat altogether the style of the young man whom they call John. But in the main, very clever and sensible, and what we find more to the point, potent to quell a disturbance when he buckles on his pistol and saber. Per consequence, we are very polite to him and treat him as a friend of the family."
I feel like the relationship between Provost 2 and Provost 3 is like how every famous sheriff of the Old West got their start.
Yeah.
They like walk in, the sheriff that's there is like hammered and passed out, and he's like, "I'll be taking over now," and then like cleans up the town.
Yeah.
Provo 2 is just like passed out in the Shriver living room. This guy's like, "All right, no more of this."
Oh man, so there's a lot that goes on in the chaotic days during and after the battle. Thousands of prisoners, thousands of wounded are marched down the pike. Lots of stragglers. At one point, John Thatcher disarms a man who's so drunk he passes out behind William's house.
Wow.
He takes the pistol from him, goes back to the Union Mills homestead, and gives it to one of Andrew's sons. And is like, you can use this if you need to.
Wow.
Later on, a provost marshal shows up, a different one, and is like, you can't keep that. We need that back.
Government property.
Are these sleepless nights? Like, with this much traffic, this much going on, like, is the family just not sleeping? Like, from the moment what was it, like 1 o'clock in the morning, Jeb Stewart's guys start to roll through?
Midnight or something.
Yeah, it's like midnight, 1 in the morning.
So from like that moment, you said it's only a couple more hours until the federal army shows up. And then once the federal army shows up, they're basically...
It's just a strain.
They're organic, but they're there, right?
Yeah.
It's like people are moving and then coming back, but it's constant. So, like, are they sleeping? Like, what is the stress level for this family? And
it's probably pretty awful for them. Kate remembers they were terrible times. Lewis later remembers the stragglers were often drunk and more or less a menace to the community. So these guys, these are children at the time. They're having a real rough time. There's very little sleep happening.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see that they'll say, like, all through the night, wagons and artillery is being moved down the pike.
It's loud.
Yeah.
Even if people aren't carrying on, like, moving equipment is loud.
Yeah.
Even wagons. So
they're just grinding down the road.
Yep.
Now, with Gettysburg only being 7 miles away, or more than 7 miles, but are they commenting about hearing it?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Oh, so they're one of the towns that can actually hear the battle.
Yes. I am pretty sure.
Everybody is like, I could hear. People in Virginia are like, we heard the battle.
Yeah. Well, the newspapers in Frederick talk about it being a dull rumble like a distant thunder.
I would believe that only because of the mountains and just how
It
barely
came
close
down
we
the
are.
valley,
Yeah,
yeah.
it comes straight down like that. But, like, people are talking. I think at one point somebody was tell me as a younger guy that somebody in Frederick's like, we heard the guns. That we could hear the guns from Antietam. I'm like, no, we couldn't. Like,
Probably not.
I doubt that. There's like too many mountains between us and there for that sound to do that.
I believe maybe South Mountain, though.
Yeah, well, because that's on the mountain and a part of it on the eastern. I don't know if that's right. Yeah, eastern facing side, the side that faces Frederick or closer. But once they're on the other side of the mountains into the Boonesboro, no, like, we're not hearing any of that.
Yeah, we have. So there's a couple of references to them hearing it. I don't have the name on this one, but it says Uncle William has suffered a good deal from our troops. So this is one of the children of Andrew. Yada yada yada. They were fighting in Gettysburg today. We can hear the firing distinctly.
Wow.
Kate also remembers something along those lines.
Well, they definitely heard Pickett's charge in the preceding bombardment.
Yeah.
I mean, they definitely heard that.
We heard the cannon of the battle, and soon the wounded and prisoners began to come down the pike toward Westminster. So this is probably July 1st that she's remembering, because that's when you first hear about the wounded and the prisoners coming down.
Right,
yeah.
And she says, soon the wounded. So she remembers hearing the fighting before the wounded and the prisoners come down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're definitely hearing it for pretty much the whole battle.
That makes sense with the depot in Westminster.
Yeah, I think Herman Haupt has taken over the railroad there and said, I'm in charge.
There are some hospitals set up in Westminster, too, and the railroad there for moving the prisoners.
Exactly.
I mean, this
so
town,
there's a lot going on.
This town is an auxiliary site for that operation because John Reynolds, when he does buy the farm, doesn't go to Westminster. He comes here to this town. So, like, this whole area, anywhere there's a rail line, Herman Haupt is basically organizing this mass supply and casualty sort of situation here. So these are
He
sounds
was
like these
genius.
are yeah. And so it sounds like these are some of the first guys to utilize that system.
And a lot of the wounded come down the pike. Many of them are walking wounded. Lewis Shriver remembers, as a child, helping them work the pump in the front yard, which still stands today, to dress their wounds. Going back to my time at Civil War medicine, the water dressing was the primary thing, where you're always putting water on it. You want to keep the wound wet as much as possible, to the point that, like, there's an anecdote of one officer who's wounded in battle, and he opens his canteen and pours it on the wound because he knows you're supposed to get it wet. That's obviously not how that works, but at the time they thought it was.
Right.
So
Just
he's
rinse it
there
off, dude.
helping him out. This like 12-year-old kid is in the front yard working this pump to all these guys who've been shot. It's pretty chaotic. It's a pretty bonkers time for everybody.
2 questions. The pump, same hardware? So like if we go there today,
probably ship a Theseus. It's the same spots, the same thing, but is that too deep of a cut?
No, that was a good one. That's why it caught me. I was like, wow, like what a hard one.
Wow, that was good. I like that.
So, Dan, that actually like stole, because I was going to make a stupid joke, but that was really good. I was going to ask, because you were talking about like rinsing off things. I was like, at one point medicine was at odds, right? It was like rub some dirt in it or rinse it off. But that's a stupid joke now, because that was such a good. Let's just cancel the show. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Kyle Dalton. He just won our whole podcast forever. Good job. All right, so terrible day. Wounded are coming in here. The reason I ask that is because we always forget that the people in historical events are people. These aren't just superhuman juggernauts that can endure all this, right? Like, imagine how you, like the listener out there, imagine if like 50,000 people, like this massive portion of the Union Army or an enemy force that you're not aligned with moves through and ahead. Imagine all of this is just happening in your house or in your front yard. Like, what kind of stress do you think? Like, imagine how stressed out you get around the holidays. A time of love and happiness where you are surrounded by people you mostly care about, your family. Like, cheer, positivity. Imagine how stressed out you get, because I could tell you I'm projecting a little bit around the holidays. I get very stressed out, especially when my wife just tells me we're hosting. Imagine that, but except for the fact that it's not a holiday, it's war. These are real life and death things. Like, I can't imagine. So as soon as you started describing this, I started wondering, like, how jacked up is the Shriver family right now? Like, are any of them sleeping?
Yeah, it's got to be a rough time.
Exactly. Your local professional stadium has just emptied and walked right through
your
place.
Your house. Yeah, 100%.
Well, to make it a little personal, I don't know if you guys heard about what happened on my street the other day.
Oh, I saw the fire.
Yeah.
I saw this massive, like, down, somebody rammed a car, started a fire.
I heard about that, yes.
Yeah, so this guy comes off the freeway 6 a.m, and he is high as a kite.
Yeah.
And he is driving so fast. There's no skid marks. There's no brake. He hits, so we've got a driveway to our house. He hits 3 cars so hard, they accordion into each other and block off our driveway and hit 2 more cars on the other side. Our trash can was out front and just pancaked between them.
Well, I gotta laugh.
Huge fireball.
So Frederick News Post shares a video of this flaming car, and then it shows credits who the video's from, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I know that guy.
Yeah, he's my neighbor across the street.
But I was like, I'm pretty sure that guy is in our little history community. I was like, that's
and the guy who tackled him is Josh Faust. He's
that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Like that's the guy who credited.
He's the one who tackled him.
Josh actually tackled
the guy. The guy bit him.
Jesus.
That's not funny. That could get you very sick.
Now, thankfully, it didn't break the skid, but he did have to go get it treated and stuff.
Let me tell you what. If I do some good Samaritan stuff like that and you bite me, you're going to whoever you pray to. You're not gonna get to go wherever legally. You're going to the next world.
So the reason I bring all this up is that my wife and I, we're asleep at 6 a.m. We have a baby, and we hear an accident, and that's not uncommon on our street. Unfortunately, it's a major thoroughfare now to a freeway, and it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
But I'm like, oh, great. That's probably the intersection stuff happens. And my wife gets up. She looks out the window. She goes, there's a fire. And I can see the orange going through the window. And I'm like, oh, we got to go.
Yeah.
So she grabs the baby. I throw on some pants. We run downstairs. And I look out the front door, and it is a fireball. It is an explosion. And it's like, we got to get out of here. Because there's only one car that's on fire right now.
Right.
And all these others are right next to it, and there's no fire trucks.
Yeah. Whoa.
So I grab the baby, and I try to go out the front door, and the fireball's so big we can't get down the porch. And I have to hand the baby over the banister to neighbors who are nearby. Thankfully, one of our neighbors is an EMT, and she's got a fire extinguisher there, like ready to save people. So I just hand it to her. And then the dog is also too scared to go anywhere, so I have to pick her up and hand her to another neighbor. And then we run out the back door. And it's that kind of chaos is something that you can't imagine until you're in it.
Sure.
And you get that adrenaline rush so that even after everything is settled, you're still coming down.
Dude, that's the worst part. So on a personal level for you, I hate those moments because when I make it through them, I feel awful. Like just when my body starts to drain that moment out. I hate that coming down moment. That's crazy how small that whole world is, by the way. Because once I saw the video and the video was credited to Josh Faust, I was like, cool. Like, well, I get, not that he's a close personal friend, but it was like, I know who that guy is.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, by the way, that happened directly in front of my house. It's like, everybody I know was at this event. But so imagine that. That's just like a single car accident, right? Like a very small thing. Like we're talking about like at least 2 corps of the Union Army moved through this year. Like 1 full corps and elements of 2 other corps. Because it's like, I believe the 2nd Corps almost entirely through this area. Huge elements of the 5th Corps. Huge elements of the 6th Corps. Because Sedgwick's running behind, as we know, famously at Gettysburg. But they come up through this area. So like if you're the Shrivers, it's just like, dude, constant,
yes,
constant,
days and days, and there's also an intentionality too. Like the accident that I experienced is like scary, but it's also a little bit kind of a hand of God thing.
Yeah,
this guy was driving up from Northern Virginia. He was like bouncing off cars in Northern Virginia and came across the Potomac all the way up to Frederick.
Wait, dude made it all the way here?
All the way to
Frederick?
Ride? Somehow was not killed on the way, and nobody got hurt in the end. But there's no intentionality to that. That's just like crazy stuff going on.
Yeah.
Warfare is very intentional.
Right. Yeah.
These guns are meant to kill people.
And they're at the Shriver's house because the Shrivers live near where these meaningful roads are.
Right. And when these guys are going to William's house and being like, we know about you.
Right.
And they're armed and they may have just killed somebody.
Yeah.
They might be coming from Gettysburg.
They kill people aligned with you.
Right. It's a pretty terrifying moment that even with, whatever incidents we've been through, it's not the same thing.
Why wouldn't William? It's William that's the Confederate.
Yeah, he's the secessionist.
Why would he not flee?
I think
just leave, dude. Just go somewhere.
You
have to know the land.
haven't seen in the sources them saying what their motivations were, but I think if he left, his property's done.
The other
good point.
Good point. And the other thing I could put my brain behind, I guess, is the same genetic material that made the one guy go outside and say, I'm a Union man.
Yeah. These are brothers.
Exists across the street as well, and he is a Confederate man.
Yes.
So there's probably that same
There's probably a little bit of that pride going
everybody
on.
is Leonardo DiCaprio in Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. Okay, so all right, so let's move past the stress, because obviously I could live in this because I love the human facet of stories forever. That's why this site, that's why Union Mills is such an incredible site, because it is a human story site. There's no battle there.
Yes.
You can focus on the industry, but what you're really there to hear about is the Shriver family.
Yeah.
And the generations of that family that did all these things, experienced war, experienced U.S. history, blah, blah, blah. But it's the human element that makes the site magical.
That's the common denominator. And, there's a lot of overlap in a lot of this stuff. The sons of Andrew take over the tannery January 1st, 1862. So as the war is happening, they're expanding their business. They're talking about like, hey, is it a good idea to get a steam engine to work our tannery? And they eventually get one. And they spend a lot of time like installing it and going to different manufacturers and figuring out which one is best. They're just living their life while the largest war in North America is going on.
Do they ever pick up, say, government contracts or anything like that for their leather goods?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I was just curious.
But the war eventually ends, of course.
Well, I mean, technically it ends. I watch the news, Kyle.
65 rolls around. A couple of months after the end of the war, the Confederate sons come home. The Unionists, one son serves. He actually goes out before Gettysburg with his brothers and draws straws. He draws the short straw and signs up to go fight with the Pennsylvania Emergency Forces. So he's gone for the Battle of Gettysburg and all the chaos that's happening. But he's discharged shortly thereafter, comes back home. The two families eventually reconcile, and business continues to grow there. The war was kind of a speed bump when it comes to the entrepreneurial history. For the family, it's a major turning point. It's a very traumatic event that they can all hang their hat on. Again, the recontextualization of Union Mills as being in Union is strength. I am a Union man. It's not just the joining of families. It's now a national story that they have a part in. So this is a recontextualization of the site, but family continues to grow. As I mentioned, T. Herbert Shriver, who serves with the VMI cadets, he goes on to state government. He becomes an elector for the president. There's a canning company started there in 1869 by one of Andrew's sons, the B.F. Shriver Canning Company, which becomes a major industry. Their buildings still stand today in Westminster. They're given awards in World War I and World War II for their efforts in providing food for the country and for the soldiers on the front.
Cool.
That's an interesting side note for this region of Maryland, because Frederick County and apparently Carroll County has a huge canning industry that develops in the 20th century that we don't hear about today.
Yeah,
I was completely unaware.
Yeah, it's something that we very delicately touch on at my site just because of some of the migrant labor that comes up specifically to work the farms for the canning industry.
So you're telling me, Matty B, that whenever we finally figure out how to get the History Things podcast over to the Western Front, when we pick up the detritus that's still on the field, one of those cans in a U.S. trench might have come from this little old county here?
100%.
Wow, that's kind of neat.
Yeah, it becomes kind of their keynote industry in the 20th century as the tannery kind of falls away by the early 20th century. But the canning industry becomes big, very big. And actually, we're going to have, by the time this comes out, we'll have already done it. In March, we're doing a pub talk about one of the inventions.
And you had a great time at it.
It was fantastic. Yeah, all of you should have been there. You missed out.
Yeah, if you missed it, losers. Go next year.
And yeah, the family continues to grow. William's descendants become the famous Shrivers, Sergeant Shriver. Sergeant Shriver later says, "Everything I am is because of Union Mills." He's very connected to it, and he has inherited this story of the Civil War that's passed down, and he tells it several times.
I feel like they have to be connected to the Shrivers in Pennsylvania, because don't they also claim Sergeant Shriver?
Do they?
I think they do.
I mean,
I knew that from way back.
His granddad is William, I think. He is a direct descendant of William.
I'm fairly certain once upon a time, because I used to be a part of a living history group that used to do the Confederate sharpshooter impression there during the battle anniversary.
Oh, yeah, at the Shriver house.
Yeah, so for a number of years, I would have some pretty intensive conversations about the house, the history with the docents and staff there, and I'm almost certain that somebody there, but look, let's be real, all three of us public interpreters, we know that not all of us do the right thing. Some people just make stuff up. So who knows?
Oh, man,
but I'm fairly certain that I heard something not once upon a time, somewhere along the line of that family is connected to Sergeant Shriver. Because I think I did the thing that people probably do at your side. I made the Maria Shriver Joker connection because it's the only Shriver I really know by name. And then they were like, well, yes, but not so. She's more by marriage, and I'm almost certain your sites have to be connected. Like
it would be very weird if there wasn't a connection.
Right.
We'll say that. But we are still trying to establish the genetic connection between the two families.
I love connections between things, because going to the canning thing and how I was joking about Western Front, like I love the connection that Maryland has to bricks around this nation.
Sure.
Like the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse is full of bricks that were made in Baltimore. When I went down to, what's the fort in Savannah? McAllister's my earth fort that I love, but what's the big one? Pulaski. A ton of those bricks came out of Maryland, Virginia, and it's like, yes, this is ours too. It's like, you get those little like claiming things. So it's cool that the Shrivers might have connected directly to the Western Front, directly to Second World War, stuff like that. How do those families get involved in those wars? Because I know that the big part of this chat was the Civil War. It is the defining moment for that family, but defining moments can be however you frame that or lens that, right? So like World War I changes everything. World War II changes everything.
Yeah.
Like that changes a family. The Civil War changed that family.
Yes.
But did they get involved in things that changed the world later, like Spanish-American War?
Yeah, and earlier.
Okay.
So Battle of Baltimore, 1814. They have two sons who are on the front there.
They have defenders?
Yeah, they have defenders. And I recently found a letter by Samuel Smith, the commander of forces in Baltimore, to Andrew back at the Homestead saying, I don't think the war is over. He's writing in October. It's after the Battle of Baltimore. He's like, I don't think the war is over. I think the British are coming back. Please take my family in as refugees.
Wow.
So they are deeply connected to the Battle of Baltimore. And again, Francis Scott Key smokes all their tobacco.
Right, exactly.
They're very politically involved. You see that throughout their history. They're always involved in elections. The Civil War makes Andrew and his descendants deeply Republican. They are hardcore Republicans into the 20th century, to the point that Lewis gets very upset with Teddy Roosevelt for spoiling the vote. He does not like the Bull Moose Party.
Right.
There's a poster we have in our collection that will soon be going into a temporary display we're doing on elections at the Homestead, and it's a Garfield campaign poster. And on it, written in pencil, is victory or death. And then in tiny sheepish letters underneath is, it was both. So they're deeply involved politically.
That's savage.
When it comes to military history, they are involved in the Spanish-American War. Henry Wirt Shriver, the one who joined Pennsylvania Emergency Forces.
What's his name?
Henry Wirt Shriver.
Oh, I thought you said Henry Wirtz. I was like, whoa.
No.
I was
no.
Is he named? Is he from the family across the street?
No.
Actually, the Provost Marshal, John Thatcher, who was protecting the family, he dies at Andersonville.
Oh,
So there is an Andersonville
really?
connection there.
Jeez.
That's by research by David Lovelace, who did a lot of research on the Shriver families in the period. Henry Wirt Shriver, he's the one in Pennsylvania Emergency Forces, the short straw guy. His son, Henry Wirt Shriver Jr., we're doing this again, he joins up with the 1st DC Volunteers in the Spanish-American War. And he goes down to Tampa. This is also something we've just discovered. Goes down to Tampa with them to get ready to go, and he gets a hernia pulling food out of his oven. And they send him to a hospital in Georgia. He never goes overseas. And he gets malaria at the hospital.
Jeez.
No.
This poor guy. He eventually gets discharged. He goes home. There's a couple of diary entries from his mother and his uncle talking about what it was like to have him back. They decorated the dance hall, the same place where they entertained General Barnes. And they had general jollifications, is the way his uncle puts it.
Jollification.
Jollifications, a great word. They both write, his mother and his uncle write about how he looks kind of thin, kind of weak, like he's had a pretty hard time.
Yeah, he had malaria.
And then
He's
in
going to carry that for the rest of his life.
I know.
Yeah, 1902, he gets arrested for pension fraud.
Really?
They take him to jail in Frederick.
What?
I'm very unclear on why, because that's very obviously like in service. He gets a hernia doing food for the troops, and then he gets malaria in a military hospital.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what happened. We're still doing the research on this. His mother blames these scoundrels' lawyers.
What?
But we don't really know what's happened yet. There's still more research to be done. World War I, World War II, they're mostly doing the canning. That's the big thing. They're doing a lot of home front stuff. One of the Shrivers at Avalon, Williams Place, across the street, is leading the Red Cross for the region. She's doing like blood drives and teaching nurses and that kind of thing. So they're definitely involved. The Klein brothers, who are Shriver descendants, the last residents of the Homestead, and the founders of our foundation, they all go overseas and serve.
In the Second World War?
In the Second World War. And they come back, and they one of them, Frederick especially, is kind of the head one pushing for the foundation and the museum. He becomes a history professor. He writes several books about the Civil War, a lot of which is what gives us the research we have today. There's a long history of Shrivers in service.
Union Mills is such an incredible site. As I'm thinking about like the walkthrough we did, like there's post-Revolutionary War history, there's Federalist era history, there's the expansion into what will become our Civil War era. When I say expansion, I mean a lot of things. Like the U.S. does a lot of growing in a lot of different ways after the Federalist era, right before the American Civil War. Obviously, the Civil War is this huge hinge, this moment, this pivot point for the family. But just, I'm trying to think of all the things I've absorbed from you just in the short time you've been associated with the site. Like there was not that the candidate was there, but there was a significant political speech given there for the local community, right? By
Francis Scott Key.
I was going to say,
always comes back to the Keys in this area.
But I'm just trying to think, there's been these grand scenes at this home. Yes. All throughout its history. Why did the family let go of it? Like how do you keep it for so long, experience so much as a family, honestly get to the other side of the Second World War and go, we are going to move on now? Like how does that moment, and like why did they do that? Like I can tell you that at the site I work at, the family that owns it long term, they are too successful, it seems, on paper. After a while, the property taxes became too much, so the family didn't want to, but had to let go of the property. Why do the Shrivers, Kleins, why do they let go of the house, the property?
Because they understand the value of it. They understand that there is a lot to be said historically. Again, the initial focus is on the Civil War. It's expanded since then. But they know that these stories are powerful. And again, Frederick Klein, who's leading the Klein brothers in this effort, at least as far as I've read, he is a history professor. Okay. And he knows these papers, these stacks and stacks of thousands and thousands of papers detailing all kinds of history. Again, the Samuel Smith letter, the Anti-Prohibition Committee, the 1840 presidential campaign of William Henry Harrison. We have a ballot box in our collection. There's just tons and tons of stuff, and especially documentation, that is all original to this house. I've worked at a lot of house museums, and there's very few where almost everything is original. This is one of those. where practically everything you're going to see is original to the people who live there. And I think
amazing.
they knew the value of that, even though it's, the 1960s, it's the centennial of the Civil War. We're coming out with the bicentennial.
Yeah.
There's museum fever, and everybody wants to make a museum. They had something they knew was exceptional. And they handed that over to the county and then later founded the foundation. It's now a public-private partnership. We work with Carroll County government. They do a lot of great work for us. Really, we couldn't exist without them.
Sure.
And the papers are now at the Maryland Center for History and Culture, most of them anyway. We did retain some records, especially from people that they, I think, didn't realize the significance of when those papers were first donated in the 1950s. Specifically, one of their aunts, Mary Weinbrenner Shiver, that's Henry Wirt's wife. All of her diaries and cookbooks are still in our collection.
Oh, that's neat.
And again, she's writing these diaries in like 1902. This is the 1950s. It's just their aunt. They aren't realizing that she's got other stuff to say. And if you flip through the diary, you could be mistaken in thinking that it really doesn't have much. Because most of it is, I cooked this today. I went and had dinner with so-and-so. But that's how we found out about her son being arrested in 1902. She writes in there and she underlines it in red. So there are like gems hidden in there. And also that day-to-day still matters.
Definitely.
If we're going to tell a domestic story, we shouldn't be talking about just the exceptions, just when the armies came through and tore up all their fences.
Right.
We should also be talking about, well, what's it like in 1851?
On a
what
random,
are they doing?
On a random Tuesday.
Yeah. What's it like to live here? We have a lot of kids' toys. What was it like to be a kid here? We've talked a lot about adult topics, politics, warfare, but what is it like to just be a kid?
Well, the kid part's also something that's impressive to me when it comes to how much the Shriver family held on to over the years, as you are about to learn hardcore in the next year, as your wee one starts to become independently mobile. Kids are destructive, bro. Like my two little girls are individually hurricanes. If they haven't retired the names of my daughters yet as hurricanes, they should, because there are no storms greater than my two daughters, who I love more than anything, but they destroy stuff. I mean, that's just what kids do. And it's always been that way. When people are like, kids have changed, people have changed. No, we haven't. We've been the same forever.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, the Shriver's sitting on original paper this, original that. It's like, with the amount of children that family has had around it for those long, how do they have all this stuff?
I'm surprised so many of the toys survive in like pretty good condition. We have these tiny little ships from either the Spanish-American War or the Great White Fleet. And you can hold like all 5 of them in the palm of your hand. And they still have the rigging on there and little American flags. And it's like, how do the kids not chew this thing to destruction?
So
I would have chewed it if I was a kid.
So as I'm learning now, hypothetical question maybe, as you look around this room, there are some toys that are in pretty good shape that I have reacquired as an adult because I played with my versions of them until they were dust.
It's possible the Klein brothers like recollected stuff.
What's what I was wondering, because like I'm looking at an Undertaker toy right now, and I'm like, my version of the Undertaker was destroyed by the time I had like fake Halloween blood all over it at one point. Like, I played with my toys. So I'm like, cool, that Undertaker was definitely not mine from my childhood. But just thinking about it, it's like maybe they just, in 1920 were like, dude, those are the ships I had when I was a kid. You never know.
Not impossible.
They're like the original micro machines.
Yeah.
What's coming up for Union Mills? So by the time you're hearing this, it is right before. I mean, we are talking within a week. You will hear this episode, and within a week, your big Civil War event will take place. So obviously, let's start with that. So in July, Civil War at Union Mills. What's the theme of the event this year?
The event is called Citizen Meets Soldier. It's we're sort of refocusing the story. We've had this event going since 1992, and it's had many different iterations. I found a newspaper article recently advertising the first one in 92, and the theme was Better Dead Than Reb.
I was going to say.
Awesome.
I was going to make a joke about hoot and shoot, but that is a hell of a lot better.
Yeah. But we are now refocusing it back to the experiences that we can document for the site. Last year, the board adopted a strategic plan, a roadmap for how we're going to grow as an institution. And a big thing that was emphasized through that by the effort of Tony Eckerd is our site, our stories. When the strategic plan talks about interpretation, we have so much to say about us. We should be saying it.
Right.
And in the past, the Civil War event was sometimes literally just called Civil War Encampment. And that's fine. But we can make it say a lot more by focusing hard on who these people are and what they're experiencing.
Right.
So we're going to try to refocus it on the house and tell the stories that they experienced. We're going to have a medical display there near the pump. As I mentioned, they use the pump for treating the wounded that went by. Nice. And also, again, we had the medical purveyor who lived across the street. Mm-hmm. We have people coming to portray provost marshals. And in the records, we know where the provost marshal's tent was set up. So we'll be setting it up on the exact spot the provost marshal was.
Hey,
Pipe Creek Civil War Roundtable is providing us with interpreters portraying prisoners of war, an often undertold aspect of the conflict. They're going to be portraying Confederate prisoners taken at Gettysburg. What are their experiences like? What are they thinking in the immediate hours and days after they've been taken? What anxieties do they have as they march down that road? The Shrivers are constantly writing about the hundreds and thousands of soldiers being marched down to Westminster to hit the train and go to prison camps. So we're really trying to refocus on the stories we can tell. One thing that I really hope gets off the ground, we haven't confirmed it yet, we have sketches and journal entries about musical performances in the grist mill.
Oh.
We have an illustration of two men dancing to a banjo in the grist mill, in the exact room where it is. So I'm trying to get a guy who plays banjo to come out.
Let me tell you what,
do that.
If there were a banjo in here, there'd be 3 men dancing to a banjo. Because if you hear a banjo and you don't want to stomp your feet, I don't know what kind of person you are.
So we're trying to tell that story. And another one that we're working on right now, we have another group coming that is going to be portraying the process of conscription. One of the sons of Andrew was conscripted. He was part of the effort to try and get enough militia that they wouldn't have to do conscription in Carroll County.
Right.
And he didn't get enough people to sign off, so he got drafted. So we're going to have sort of a beginning to end. What would it be like? What is your experience going from getting your draft notice to marching off? And
I'm excited.
I think that's going to be really cool. We're going to have reprints of the actual draft notice that we have in our collection saying, report to here on this day, you've been chosen.
I'm excited about this, man, just because as somebody who has been peripherally, did I get that right? I might have struggled over that word a little bit.
Okay.
As somebody who's been hovering around the Union Mills homestead for a number of years as a living historian and as a friend of colleague of people that work there and things, it's nice to hear this and to hopefully experience it firsthand myself, just because as somebody who is very publicly just sort of soured on just what we have turned living history into in the old era of reenacting, I'm excited for this. This sounds like thoughtful. It sounds intentional. It sounds
actual
like
education.
People will learn. Like it will teach. It will tell the story. Because I have been to some sites, man, that are just like, yeah, there's some stuff that happened here, but we're going to make bang bang over there real loud for the next 30, 40 minutes. And it's like, cool. Like, are we putting on a show? Or are we teaching with entertainment? Like that's the key, is like teaching with entertainment, like not just being entertainment.
Edutainment.
Mm-hmm. Edutainment. But is that like good? Because I think some people turn that into a negative term.
It can be both. It can definitely be both.
There's a difference between what I'm trying to do and hopefully accomplish and the old Disney Johnny Tremaine.
Yes.
Yes.
I am a loyalist. A loyalist is.
Yeah, right. So I'm excited for that, man, because like that's why I think after the walkthrough we did last winter, I was like, why have I been a part of so many, as I call them and a number of others call them, hoot and shoots here? Like there's so much more to do and talk about than to just stand here and fight a battle that never happened on this property.
Well, I don't want to denigrate the volunteers.
No, it's been an amazing experience, but like upon learning the rest of the story, it's like, why has this been the experience? Like we should have always. What I'm saying is this sounds like something. If you've been a part of that, like there's more. Yeah. Because so many people are burnt out on the burning powder. So many people are burnt out on the stagnant line experiences. It's like. This sounds like it's rejuvenating. Like if you're an old timer in that community and hobby like I am excited to hear that a site like this is like, there's going to be a new opportunity, series of new opportunities at places you're familiar with.
Well, and again, I don't want to denigrate the volunteers that made this event happen. I wouldn't have an event to inherit if not for the folks that came before.
No, and that's not what I'm saying. And I apologize if I am.
No, and I'm just putting context to it. The thing that turns it from a hoot and shoot to an educational event is the materials provided by the site.
Right.
I've definitely done living history events where I go to a site and I'm like, what's the story here? And I don't get one.
Yeah.
It's up to us to provide that information for the volunteers. When I say, oh, I've got all this information about a provost marshal, can you do a provost marshal? Or in the case of the conscription, the guy said, hey, this is a program I'm working on. Do you have a connection? I said, yes, here's some documentation. That kind of stuff is how you transform those events. And it requires work that can be difficult to do if you don't have an academic background. If you don't know how to do that research and organize it. And not every site does that. The focus has to be on day-to-day. It has to be on making sure that the bills get paid, that the doors are open, and that you've got somebody working the gift shop.
Right.
So there needs to be room for that kind of growth, and not every museum has that available to them. So again, I don't want to denigrate the volunteers that came before, but it does require that we do something on our end to turn it into the event that we hope it will be.
No, I like that. I think you're absolutely right. It's taking, not only giving the event to the public, but really taking control's not the right word, but giving it a focus, giving it the direction that you want to have it go, so that it doesn't just turn into a hoot and shoot where the volunteers now have to figure out, well, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's more what I mean is like over the years, there was over in so many reenacting communities, there were just breakdowns between the sites. The sites would do good jobs, and not all the times doing good job, but they would always do their best to provide information. And then it's like the person who's acting as the middle. So like, let's say in the old living history unit I was a part of, right? The site would do a good job of handing off information to our commander, we'll call them. That guy would turn around and do nothing.
Yeah. Sometimes the breakdown is beyond the control of the site.
But it sounds like these types of events, like this sort of structuring is a good way to sort of work around that, because you can never get away from it. It's the human element of things. People are always people. But when you provide the framework of these are our stories,
right, it
helps people sort of stay on the ball. And I think that's awesome, because you've had a number of dedicated volunteers, even more than I know personally. Like I'm a man about town, but I don't know everybody, and I've only been around Union Mills for about a decade as intensely as I have been in the reenacting world. But like, think about this. Like, everybody involved has helped make that place as special as it is right now. Yeah. And it's going to get even better.
And again, a lot of that is the strategic plan. The board came together and they said, what makes us special? What separates us from other museums? What do we have to say? And they came down on our site, our stories, and that's the foundation of this event. It'll be July 20th and 21st. You can find information on our website, unionmills.org. Of course, we'll be posting stuff to social media, too. Facebook and Instagram are the best places to find us. Civil War event, Citizen Meets Soldier. We're excited for it, July 20th, 21st.
Outside of the Civil War, what else does Union Mills do that you guys get excited about? You guys do a whole big corn. You guys were roasting some corn.
Yeah, corn roast comes a few weeks after the Civil War event, first Saturday in August.
So get your corns ready. Once you're done shaking off your Civil War hangover, get your corns ready, get your cobbers, head on back.
And then September, we have the Maryland Microbrew Festival.
Is that a new event?
No, that's been around for a long time.
I saw that this year advertised, but I was like, or this past, but I was like, I don't know that's, I asked my wife, I was like, is this new? Which is, I don't know.
We are expanding advertising this coming year, so hopefully everybody will have heard of it by the time that this premieres. Last weekend of September, last Saturday of September, Maryland Microbrew Festival. It's a great time, live music, ton of microbreweries there, and there's a microbrew competition, or a homebrew competition, actually. Folks are sometimes given parameters. Last year it was using Ukrainian hops and a Ukrainian style.
Can I beg you to be a judge? Can I beg you to be a judge?
Oh, for you to be a judge. Yes. I thought you meant me, and I was like, obviously.
No. I mean, like,
he wants to be a
I want to
judge.
be Pat from the History Things podcast, great fans and supporters of our site, local boys. I just want to host. Not host. I want to be a judge in the microbrew beer tasting.
I know that's done
this morning, it sounds like.
That's done through a homebrew association that we partner with.
All right.
I can put in a good word
just
for it.
Just be like, look, I got a guy. He's super good with a microphone. He's very gregarious. Like, he's definitely...
he looks like every brewer you've ever seen.
Yeah, he would do it right.
Thank you.
It's true. I don't know anything about brewing, though. When I put my glasses on, it gets even worse.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
It's like, oh, God, he's a hipster. Anyway, I love Union Mills, and I hope to get to know it more. I don't get out as often as I do, and this is one that I can get to because it's in my backyard. So I hope to engage with it more, and I hope that you guys and gals and ghouls and aliens and goblins and everybody goes and visits this site. If you are within striking distance of Carroll County, Maryland, there's no excuse not to get here. The place is in good hands. I want to pay you a compliment. You know, you said hopefully this and hopefully that. I'm sure it will all work because you have a track record of
success.
lifting places up where you go, your hard work, it manifests into tangible results. The museum that you left behind was in better shape than when you got there, and it was always a really cool place. So just a testament to you that you're the man. And for Union Mills, they're lucky to have you, and we as a default are lucky to have you because we'll be able to enjoy newer and cooler and more interactive historical programming there. We're very excited for that.
Yeah.
Can I get some ground corn for my fort? I know that I asked you that in private. You're like, we don't make it for food. Why don't you make it for food?
It's not food grade.
Okay.
It's just for interpretive purposes. I'm sure we could do something, some kind of historical experiment or a video or something.
We're making bread. Most of that bread seems to have come from corn stuff. It should have been.
Oh,
from
you mean
flour.
at Fort Frederick?
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I'm sure we can make something like that.
That's what I'm saying. Let's do like a site-to-site collaboration.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'll come over. I'll grind it myself.
I think our Miller may have something to say about that.
I met him. He definitely was a cool guy, but you could tell like that's his machine. Like he definitely was like, this is mine. This is how I run it.
Yeah. No, he takes pride in that, and he should.
As he should, yeah. Yes, as he should.
I said, get on your microphone, Matt. Matt, nobody knows you're in the room when you talk back there. This is awesome. So, Kyle, thank you for coming on the History Things podcast again. We'll have you back. As always, you are forever invited. Anytime you got the urge to tell a story, you don't even have to wait for us to ask you. You can just ask us.
Great.
If you are, again, not following the Union Mills Homestead on social media, go do that. As Kyle said, Facebook and Instagram are the best places to go do that. Do you have a YouTube presence at all yet?
A little bit. There should be more coming later this year.
All right, so you're growing.
Probably in August we'll start seeing some stuff.
All right. Well, just keep an eye out for that. As always, on our end, you are in the midst of the summer blitz. So I hope that you enjoyed this nice conversation about this cool family. And I hope it was a breather. Because it wasn't a breather. This was an awesome time. Dude, you were like, you jacked me up. Like, I'll be honest. When we started this recording today, I'm tired. I had a rough night. And I said to Matt, basically, the coffee is not working type of thing. And
Man, I'm right
up.
there. I know it doesn't sound like it, but I am half
But I'm
asleep.
up right now. Like, I'm ready to go. Like, you fixed me. You got my morning going.
Exactly. You both did great, guys.
Like, I'm ready to roll. So I am super excited. So hopefully that energy came through for you in the middle of this blitz. It's overwhelming. There's episodes left and right. I don't even remember because I'm not looking at our schedule, but we're covering a lot. We're doing a lot in July. We're doing a lot in August. And this is one of the very first times that we got an episode out ahead of an event we were promoting. Because it's always like, Matt, tell us about your book. That's been out for 6 months by the time you heard this. Matt, where are you speaking? 6 months after you did it. Stuff like that. So this is one that'll be out before. So go to Union Mills, experience the Civil War story there and the rest of it. And then come back and hang out with the History Things podcast while you're driving home. Listen to us driving there. Listen to us driving home. Anyway, we love you guys. Thank you for listening to History Things Podcast. 5-star ratings and reviews on your favorite podcast apps are the best ways to help us. We thank you for doing that. As always, you can follow us on our social medias after you click the like and follow button on Union Mills Homestead. If you haven't done it for the History Things Podcast, what the hell is wrong with you? It's been 5 years we've been telling you to do this. But go to Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, the History Things Podcast. Make sure you click like and follow as well. And then go buy one of Matt Boulder's books. Damn it. He's got 4 of them out. Actually, since you have 5 out by this point? Where are we at?
It won't be out yet, but there's a 5th one.
There's a 5th one coming? All right, you'll hear more about that in our mid-year when we talk about what we do off and on mic here. So thank you all for listening to the History Things Podcast. For our guest tonight, Kyle Dalton. For my co-host with the most, Matty B, I am your co-host, Pat McGuire, saying we will catch you all later.
Have a good night.